They control with emotion. We reveal the pattern. Psych Atlas.
Most people believe deleting a number or blocking a social profile severs a toxic tie. They are completely wrong. Physical distance is merely an illusion of safety for the emotionally uneducated. You think you have securely locked the door, yet the intruder already resides inside your internal architecture. Narcissistic control does not require physical proximity. It thrives entirely on pure psychological occupation. Every silent argument you rehearse in your head, every imagined victory, functions as a direct, invisible supply line. You are actively feeding a parasite that is not even in the room. This is the dangerous paradox of phantom obedience. By obsessing over how perfectly you are ignoring them, your brain is still prioritizing their existence. True indifference cannot be faked through mere silence. Complete erasure requires a precise cognitive dismantling. To crush a narcissistic framework, you must weaponize the exact psychological state they are biologically incapable of processing. Watch this specific mechanism carefully. Here is the invisible trigger that causes their entire reality to collapse without you ever saying a single word. In his 1928 analytical framework, psychiatrist Carl Jung defined the persona as a social mask. Most people wear it. A narcissist, however, becomes it. There is no structural foundation underneath. Because this identity is hollow, it operates like a failing acoustic chamber. It cannot generate its own frequency. It survives strictly by bouncing its distorted signals off your emotional reactions. This is exactly why behavioral silence fails. Blocking their number is merely an external barricade. If your mind still calculates their next move, you remain their primary power grid. Every ounce of resentment you harbor acts as a beacon. The anger confirms they matter. Your confusion proves their impact. They feed indiscriminately on both your devotion and your destruction. To dismantle this dynamic, you must initiate psychological erasure. Not anger, not suppressed communication. You must convert their memory into neutral, unusable data. Complete irrelevance is their biological predator. The real danger happens when they first sense this internal shift, because their brain immediately initiates a stealth protocol to drag you back. When you withdraw, the narcissistic mind interprets your silence as a temporary glitch. They deploy a psychological sonar. Subtle provocations, seemingly accidental messages, calculated nostalgia. They are pinging the dark. In 1938, B.F. Skinner documented the extinction burst. When a guaranteed reward abruptly ceases, the subject frantically intensifies their efforts to force a response. They are simply testing the machinery. Here is what nobody tells you about this phase. Every casual text or suddenly manufactured crisis is a diagnostic tool. They are testing the structural integrity of your compliance. If you react with fury, the circuit connects. If you explain your boundaries, the current flows. Emotional friction is their primary power source. The exact content of your response is utterly meaningless. To defeat this algorithm, you must become a dead zone. No explanation, no closure. A complete atmospheric vacuum where their signals dissipate into nothing. The performance fails without an audience. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable truth of all. You are about to realize how deeply complicit you were in building their stage. Most victims of manipulation comfort themselves with a very specific lie. They believe they were simply bystanders caught in a storm. They refuse to admit they were the atmospheric pressure that created it. A narcissistic personality is not a self-sustaining entity. Think of it as a parasitic architectural blueprint. It possesses the design of a grand building, but it steals your psychological concrete to actually stand. This means your relationship was never a mutual exchange of affection. It was a hostile infrastructure project. Every time you cried, argued, or pleaded, you were unknowingly pouring cement into their structural foundation. They did not hate your pain. They harvested it. Your emotional collapse proved they had the gravity to pull you down. Your misery was the ultimate empirical evidence of their godlike significance. Look at the disturbing reality. You were not just a partner. You were the biological host keeping their synthetic identity alive. And this is exactly why your total withdrawal is so lethal. When this biological host suddenly vanishes, the narcissist does not panic immediately. Instead, their brain constructs a terrifying internal hallucination to survive. At first, their psyche employs a heavy form of structural denial. They do not perceive your absence as an ending. They categorize your silence as a dramatic pause in their ongoing play. This creates a bizarre psychological phenomenon, like a severed optic nerve that still generates flashes of light. Their brain hallucinates your continued emotional investment, just to keep the central nervous system functioning. And this is where the dynamic fractures permanently. When days turn into weeks, the hallucination starves. The script they wrote relies on your predictable reaction, and you have entirely missed your cue. Watch carefully. They are suddenly thrust into a state of cognitive freefall. Without your emotional data feeding their algorithm, they cannot orient themselves. They have lost their geographical North Pole. You did not just walk out of the room. You quietly dismantled the entire building while they were still standing on the top floor. Their reality is now completely unsupported. But as their artificial reality finally collapses, something deeply sinister wakes up in the ruins, something they have spent their entire life running from. In 1927, psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik proved that the human brain becomes obsessed with interrupted, incomplete loops. By vanishing without a trace, you become the ultimate unresolved equation in their mind. Narcissistic survival depends on narrative monopoly. They rewrite history to ensure they remain the victim or the victor. Without your fresh emotional reactions to sculpt, their psychological clay completely dries out. This triggers a terrifying mechanical failure. The external mirrors they use to deflect their own inadequacy have shattered. Now the heavy spotlight of their consciousness is violently forced to point inward. Carl Jung called this repressed internal wasteland the shadow. It holds every insecurity, weakness, and fracture they spent decades running from. Your absolute absence removes the very barricade keeping it contained. The irony is chilling. You are not actively plotting their downfall. You are simply removing the external life support system. Their own untreated psychological toxicity is what finally begins to consume them. But to ensure this collapse actually happens, you must completely avoid the single most dangerous mistake victims make in the aftermath. The greatest error victims commit is conducting a psychological autopsy. They break their own silence just to see if the narcissist is finally suffering. This instantly resuscitates the dead connection. In 1998, neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran mapped phantom limb syndrome. When you check their social media, you are artificially stimulating a severed psychological limb. Your brain registers the ghost as reality. A virus outside a biological host crystallizes. It becomes completely inert. But the moment you expose yourself to their digital footprint, you provide the exact biological warmth required for reactivation. You do the work for them. They do not even need to manipulate you anymore. By maintaining a secret surveillance protocol, you are voluntarily running their software on your hardware. To finalize their psychological eviction, your silence must become absolute. No checking, no asking mutual friends, no decoding hidden meanings in their public behavior. Complete sensory deprivation is absolutely mandatory. Once you achieve this absolute sensory deprivation, the power dynamic inverses completely, triggering a terrifying phenomenon known as narcissistic collapse. Narcissistic collapse is rarely a theatrical breakdown. It is a rapid structural implosion. When you permanently remove their psychological reflection, their internal operating system cannot process the sudden vacuum. It simply crashes. Without your high-grade emotional fuel, they frantically seek low-tier substitutes. They might rapidly replace you or provoke public conflicts. Do not mistake this chaotic movement for recovery. It is pure mechanical panic. To maintain this dominance, you must completely strip away their mystique. Stop viewing them as a complex human being who broke your heart. Observe them as a highly predictable, malfunctioning algorithm. Psychologist Kross from the University of Michigan proved the power of self-distancing. You step out of the emotional arena and enter the observation deck. Their attempts to return evoke only clinical detachment. You are no longer the victim of a calculated mind game. You are the architect who simply walked out and took the blueprints with you. The structure is theirs to survive now. However, This newly found clinical detachment allows you to witness the final, most pathetic stage of their collapse. A stage they desperately want to keep hidden. The final stage is not an explosion. It is complete psychological irrelevance. Rejection still acknowledges their existence. Anger proves their significance. Irrelevance, however, entirely erases them from the map. When you reach this state, you do not hate them. You simply cannot process their data anymore. They have become an obsolete currency in the economy of your mind. Worthless. This is your ultimate psychological leverage. By withdrawing your emotional participation, you force their toxic projection to bounce back. The poison they intended for you now has nowhere to go. They are suddenly locked in solitary confinement with the one entity they despise the most, their own unmasked self. The absolute silence you created becomes a deafening, inescapable echo chamber. You have fundamentally rewritten the dark rules of engagement. They are desperately grasping at the gravitational pull they used to control. But you have left their orbit entirely. Untouchable. Yet as you finally establish this absolute freedom, there is one last invisible trap they will set for you. And stepping into it will instantly restart the entire nightmare. The final trap is not aggression. It is weaponized vulnerability. When a narcissistic structure completely fails, it often deploys an emergency protocol, the illusion of genuine collapse, designed to trigger your empathy. Your compassion is the last remaining biological backdoor into your system. They will construct a narrative of profound suffering, hoping your moral code will force you to break your own carefully constructed silence. Do not fall for it. This is not a sudden moral awakening. It is simply a desperate software update to bypass your new firewall. True closure means leaving their digital ghost permanently unread. You have successfully engineered their psychological removal. By mastering the agonizing art of complete irrelevance, you did not just survive their manipulation. You rendered their entire neurological framework completely obsolete. But there is a disturbing epilogue. Once they realize they cannot hack your system, they will immediately begin searching for a replacement host. And they will use your specific emotional blueprint to hunt them. In our next breakdown, we will reveal the exact three-step cycle a narcissist uses to select your replacement, and why their new relationship is secretly a twisted homage to you. You now possess the blueprint to dismantle their influence. If this framework shifted your reality, leave a trace. Like this video to signal your refusal to participate. Most will scroll away and willingly remain prey. Don't be most people. Subscribe to Psych Atlas to master the mind's dark mechanics.